So, first of all, thanks for doing this. You've been on this crazy sort of whirlwind tour.
Mm-hmm.
Have you gone anywhere, or you just been doing it mostly from your house?
Mostly from my house, just on Skype.
Now, for people who don't know the story, let's give them the short version of it. You were working at Google, and what prompted you to write this memo?
Yeah, so they would have these company-wide meetings where they just push a lot of this diversity stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it was kind of weird, so I decided to go to these secret meetings, sort of, that were about 100 people, completely unrecorded, and they would talk about some of the things that they're doing, and it would really contradict what they're saying publicly, where, oh, no, we're not changing any of our hiring practices for these candidates. And they said, yeah, we basically are making it easier for some candidates to get in. And I voiced some concerns, but people just shamed me and was like, no, you're wrong. You're just like have white male privilege. And
they said you have white male privilege? That was the actual word they used?
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And so they asked for feedback on the program. So I wrote this document to clarify my thoughts. I sent it to them. They looked at it, but they just ignored it, never told me anything. So I went to a couple more of these programs, and I gave similar feedback. I gave the same document. They kept looking at it, but just never said anything. And I would send it to random people that I knew, and half the people would be like, yes, exactly, this is what I've been thinking. And the other half would maybe disagree with some points, but it would never be emotional outbursts or anything. It would just be like, oh, are you sure that this is actually happening? It's like, yes, because I've actually been to these unrecorded meetings. This is what's happening.
So if you could get into specifics, like when you're in these meetings and they're talking about diversity, what is their concern? And is it they're trying to promote an image of diversity? Are they trying to promote actual diversity? Do they think that there's a benefit for diversity, or is it a part of their public image? And is it a lot of it to avoid criticism? Because I think there's a big issue with, if you don't have all your bases covered, 2 black women, 2 Asian men, if you don't have all your bases covered, you can get like pretty roundly criticized as not being diverse or being possibly racist. And when you do that, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah, so Google definitely has a huge target on its back. And so there are people that want to complain that, oh, Google is not diverse, therefore it's racist and sexist. And so that's a lot of their fear. They look at their representation and then compare it to the overall U.S. population and say, oh, we only have 20% women, we should have 50%. There's obviously some sexism happening. And so a lot of their stuff is, oh, we need to fix this because all this sexism is bad. And obviously, if you disagree with sexism, that's of course bad. And like, I obviously don't, want there to be any sexism, but I just don't think that that's the sole cause of this disparity in representation.
Yeah, it seems like in the interest of promoting an image of diversity, they're willing to bypass science and the truth and the reality of culture, the reality of human biology and evolutionary psychology. There's just so much that they're willing to look past to get to this one thing, which seems to be like this really important thing in today's society, that you want to promote an image of diversity.
Yeah.
It's more important than anything. So like when you're in these I wouldn't call it a class. What would you call it? A meeting? Whatever they are.
Yeah, some of them were classes. Some were, our day-long programs and
So they would
conferences.
teach you things? Like what would they teach you?
They would talk about unconscious bias.
Oh, no. Oh, like you might be racist. You have to find the racism in you? Ooh.
And there's a whole program that's trying to retrain your brain to think about race in a new way or something.
So they're just assuming you're guilty.
Pretty much. Because
you're white.
They look at the representation and say racism, sexism.
Do black people have to go to this?
No one has to, but
no one has to.
They are definitely pushing it on people, and now managers are being evaluated by how well they promote diversity and inclusion. And, it's just a slippery slope, and I think it'll eventually become part of our performance review.
So if you're a white woman, do you have to go to this? I mean, are you encouraged to go to this, or are you like, hey, you made it through? Like, this is what we've been looking for. You're fine. Or if you're an Indian woman, even better, right? Is that how it works? Or would you still have to go there and approach your unconscious biases?
Yeah, they say everyone has these unconscious biases.
Even towards white people?
Oh,
So do they have those where they have like black people with their unconscious biases towards white people?
so they never acknowledge that anyone could be racist against white people.
Of course. Why would you?
Yeah, it's all this like you can only be racist if you have power, or sexist if you have power, and
They believe that? The racist part?
yeah, I think so.
Well, that's insane. That's a redefinition. It's a very recent redefinition of the term racism, but it's very slippery and very dangerous, because you could see it as, promoting, in fact, like exonerating racism towards other ethnicities, or towards white people, or towards people that you feel like are in a privileged class. You can get away with it because it's no big deal, because they're the ones who are racist. Even if it's not even that person, if it's people who look like them that have lived for centuries, like somehow or another, you're a guilty person with your
right.
James, with your white privilege. So, like, what would they tell you when you would go to these? Did you like express some discontent, or?
Yeah, my main concern was them saying 50% in the population. Look, Google only has 20%, and so we're obviously
about women?
sexist.
Yeah.
And there were clear reasons, at least in my mind, that that's not as simple as they're making it out to be, and that there are some differences, and that could explain some of the issues that women are facing. And so a lot of these women issues in tech, I feel, are actually not really gender issues. They're just women on average are more cooperative, for example, and so they may find it harder to lean in the corporate world, like Sheryl Sandberg is saying. But there are men that also feel like that. I'm not very assertive. I'm actually pretty shy, and so I feel the same stuff. It's not that there's a ton of sexism. It's maybe that male typical behavior is rewarded, just as competitiveness is rewarded in a lot of corporate world. But it's not that we're just, oh, you're a woman, therefore you're obviously bad at coding. No one is ever saying that.
Right. I think there is absolutely an issue with assertive women being treated very differently than assertive men. Like, an assertive woman is a bitch. Like, you don't want to be around them. That's like the bias. And that's a real issue, I think, for women that want to enter into any sort of a competitive field. And, where a man would be assertive, if a woman does the exact same thing, she's looked down upon.
Yeah.
She's looked upon like a problem woman, or like someone you don't want to work with, whereas the guy is just ambitious.
Yeah, although some people will twist that and say that because a lot of it is just they try to fit their ideology, and they see one data point and they extrapolate. So they see these studies, and it's true that these women are viewed as less likable, but they are seen as just as competent. And so their performance reviewed isn't affected really by being assertive. It's just that socially they may not be as liked as much.
Right, but that's got to be a factor in the way they behave, because
Yeah.
for men, a ball-busting successful man is supposed to be like looked up to. Like, oh, this is the guy who's kicking ass in the corporate world. He's doing it right. Like, Bob is ruthless. But if Jenny's ruthless, like, you don't want to be around her. It's a weird. It's just. I feel like that if there is a real bias with men, obviously I don't work in tech, but I would assume that would be a real bias.
Yeah, and I think some of the solution to that is just allowing people to be more cooperative and, actually, so for example, at Google, you're really rewarded for owning a particular project and seeing that one project go through. But if you're someone that is just, can really help a lot of different people, and you're not necessarily the sole owner of any individual thing, but you provide a lot of value to the company, that isn't really seen as positive as someone that really drove the project alone.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That seems like a bad thing for teamwork.
Right.
Is that just a bad philosophy, or something that got stuck in the way the system works? Or
I think it's sort of just, it's hard to evaluate if I did 10% of my time on 10 different projects and I help them.
That makes sense. Yeah. So you'd have to essentially trust the workers' instincts and work ethic. And
yeah.